Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Before I begin this morning's briefing, I'd like to give a mention to Your World, aka Mr. Superboy, for having brought up this particular piece. He's often been quoted as saying that the U.S. was founded by thieves, slaves, and opportunists. It's pretty obvious to tell which is which, by the way. Clearly, people in the white media are getting more nervous about black folks in California and reparations and the dangerous precedent that would set if black people are successful in this endeavor. So now we see the tried and true strategy of trying to muddy the waters, dilute the issue, and throw everybody else into the mix. Last year, they tried it with LGBT reparations. This year, they're saying Native American reparations. The white media is saying if black Californians get reparations, then Native Americans in California are owed reparations too. Or at the very least, we can't be having a conversation about black Californians getting reparations without bringing up Native Americans. Everybody needs to be mentioned. But what doesn't get mentioned is that Native Americans in California have already been getting reparations. Just last year, while black folks were being told we need a study, we got to look into this, there'll be a task force who'll look at it, maybe do some recommendations. For Native Americans, they said, okay, here's a plot of land right here in Oakland, California. No study group required. No reparations task force. No, let's see what the governor says. We'll see if they sign off on it. Well, maybe the state legislature doesn't like the proposal. They didn't do any of that. They just said, here's some land. They're doing this for Native Americans right now in California. They've been doing it. While black folks are being told, we got to wait. We got to look at it. We got to talk about it some more. So Native Americans have already been getting reparations in California. How are they talking as if, ain't nobody giving us nothing? They've been giving them stuff for the longest time. It's documented. And notice that nobody's saying, well, you Native Americans, that happened a long time ago. Nobody ever says that to them. They're not trying those BS talking points that they keep trying to use against us. For everybody else, it never matters how long ago their mistreatment happened. And another thing that never gets thrown in other groups' faces is how many of those Native Americans, in fact, were collaborators with the Europeans. How Native American groups helped the Europeans to invade and take land from other Native American groups and to even wipe out a few of them. And how many of those Native Americans actually became spokespeople for the white government after these genocidal land grabs took place. That never gets brought up. Nobody ever tries to say, well, weren't some of your people involved? Why, these were Native Americans who were helping to kill other Native Americans. They don't do that. They just say, okay, here's the check, be on your way. But understand, this is being done as a distraction from us, and at the same time to make a lane to give benefits to other people, because while they're telling us that we have to have studies first, and we need to have a few dozen research groups first, and that process is going to take years and years, for all these other groups, they're never made to jump through any hoops. They say that they want some money, and they get it. This is meant to set up more of the same. And we keep seeing this over and over again. Whenever black people are asserting our rights, asserting our interests, and demanding what we're owed, other groups all of a sudden start getting things. All of a sudden the government's going, well, here's something for these other groups. Now, if Native Americans have a serious issue, then I think we need to have a serious conversation about the Red Indians and race. Native Americans have already gotten reparations. That's the first thing that needs to be mentioned anytime someone talks about California Native Americans reparations. They've already gotten them nationwide. They're already getting all kinds of money and land and policies exclusively for them. And it's been this way for over 120 years. They still have a Bureau of Indian Affairs in the White House. They're already being compensated many, many times over, including control of land that is theirs. Native Americans, in fact, were the very first group in America to get reparations, and they have steadily been receiving it every day ever since, and often it's been done at black people's expense. This is about maintaining a racial pecking order, where everybody else gets more than black people do. In fact, everybody else gets things and black people get nothing. When black people assert ourselves, when black people start demanding what we're owed, well, you're not getting anything, and just to make sure you get the message, everybody else is getting something. Now, if we're going to be talking about Native Americans and reparations, then one of the things that we need to mention is the Native Americans took part in the slave trade. And more recently, they ganged up on the black members of the Cherokee tribe to vote them out. And why did they vote the black members of those tribes out? Because the government said that they were going to be giving money to these Native American tribes out there in Oklahoma. So you had racist Indians who ganged up on the black members of their own tribe just to make sure those black people didn't get anything. They singled them out. And what about the white members of the tribe? Well, nothing happened. And then 3 years ago, during the so-called racial reckoning that black people brought about, our taking to the streets and our demands for justice gave enough political momentum to Native Americans that even the Supreme Court felt compelled to declare that half of the state of Oklahoma could be considered Indian territory for certain legal causes, such as criminal prosecutions. Basically, what they did was they limited the ability of the Oklahoma state prosecutors to be able to go after Native Americans, so only tribal courts could prosecute them. Now, Red Indians rejoiced when this happened because this expanded and greatly augmented their own political sovereignty over the lands that they control. But it would never have happened without black people. I have only seen one, maybe two Red Indians who ever acknowledged this fact. In the NBC piece on your screen, a Native American activist said, "Gratitude goes from Native people right now to Black Lives Matter because they have, from the beginning of their founding, had it baked into their whole process to defend other minorities as well. Because it's really hard for only 2% of the whole population to even seem to matter, much less summon some kind of energy behind it." That's what she said, and she's absolutely right. Without the political and social pressure that black people were bringing to bear, there's no way in hell the Supreme Court would have given the Native Americans anything. But as far as her whole, we're just 2% of the population business, that 2% of the population has been given land by the federal government. And they have more governmental economic benefits than black people have ever had, even though we're 13% of the population, and we're the ones who actually make things happen. We're the ones who made it possible for them to get what they've got. And yet we, 13% of the population, are completely and thoroughly overlooked and ignored. 2% of the population has gotten federal money, legal sovereignty, and programs and benefits exclusively for them. So what's she complaining about? Clearly, that 2% of the population matters a hell of a lot more than the 13% of the population who actually drives this country towards something resembling civilization. When it came time to talk about Native Americans and what they were going to get in Oklahoma, that 2% of the population was allowed to do whatever they wanted to make sure that they got it for themselves. But notice that she admits that Black Lives Matter was trying to encompass everyone. These other groups understand exactly what happens when black folks do the kumbaya thing. It always backfires in our faces. Why is it that we don't see any sort of racial reckoning by Native Americans who racially purge black tribe members? A lot of these other groups, they want to have it both ways. They want to engage in blatant anti-black racism and to work hand in hand with white supremacy when it comes to mistreating us. But then those exact same people want to come running to us when white power is calling them redskins or is starting to abuse them. To talk about any alleged racism against Native Americans without mentioning their historical targeting of black people is to tell a lie. Red Indians allied themselves with the Europeans. They fought against other Native American tribes, and they worked to reinforce and sustain slavery. They took part in the slave trade. You had a lot of these Native Americans who were themselves slave owners, owning black people. That doesn't get mentioned, though, does it? They helped to establish and prop up white supremacy. They did their part in helping to sustain this monster that is now attacking them. Their problem is that their white supremacist allies turned on them. That's the part that they don't like. But as we see, neither the Trail of Tears nor any of the other brutality white supremacy inflicted on them was ever enough for them to stop their own anti-black racism. So the same racist Indians in Oklahoma who carried out a racial purge of black people, who they admitted were only being expelled because of their skin color, they have been the beneficiaries of black people's fight for justice. They benefited enormously. And now they're saying that there shouldn't be any mention of black people in reparations unless they're included too. Same thing Alexandria Cortez was talking about with Latinos. Everybody operates out of the exact same playbook when it comes to jumping on black folks' coattails. The Native Americans were hateful and arrogant in their anti-black racism. This is well documented. And of all the crimes a group can commit, the very worst is to betray those who helped them. We helped them 150 years ago when no one else would and no one else could. We helped them in the 20th century when they piggybacked off the civil rights movement, which we made possible because we tried to make the civil rights movement into an empowerment struggle for all non-white people, just like Black Lives Matters. And these other people of color, like the Asians, Hispanics, and the Indians, they turned right around and said they were only campaigning for themselves. Muhammad Ali sacrificed his entire career, his livelihood, and damn near his life just to stand in solidarity with the Vietnamese. The entire reason that he lost his boxing license was because he refused to fight in the Vietnam War. You recall he famously said that no Vietnamese ever called me nigger. Well, that's because they were over there in Southeast Asia, but as soon as they began immigrating to the U.S., that's exactly what they started doing. They called Muhammad Ali a nigger and called every black person they met a nigger too. We have made it possible for all of these other groups to be able to prosper and merely just to live their lives, and we did it at tremendous expense to ourselves. But how were we repaid for what we did? How were we repaid for doing things for them that they were incapable of doing themselves? As we saw with the black Cherokee tribe members in Oklahoma, racial targeting was the repayment. And they were being kicked out so that these other people could take the black tribal members' money, which is no different than the reason that these white racial marauders went on their rampages in Rosewood, Tulsa, and other black Wall Streets. At the root of all those white marauding murder sprees was the putrid hatred of seeing black people with any money. That sets off these anti-black racists faster than anything. And I'm not just talking about the white supremacists. You got a whole bunch of non-white racists who get mega triggered when they see black people with any money. It fundamentally offends them. It fundamentally angers them. And that was the sole motivation when you had the Cherokee tribe in Oklahoma who attacked their own black tribal members. And who among these Native American groups stood with the black tribe members? Who said, hey, this can't be allowed to stand. We're not going to be carrying out the kind of racism that was carried out against us. Which one of them objected to it? None. Now, after that Supreme Court ruling in 2020, you had a number of these Native American groups who apparently thought to themselves, well, we were able to swing off of black folks' coattails and we got something that we wanted and we don't have to be in solidarity with black people. I mean, after all, they're beneath us, so we'll just walk off and be on our way. But as soon as black people stopped getting turned up, the Supreme Court immediately changed its mind about its ruling and said that Oklahoma state prosecutors could go right back after people on Indian territory after all. They largely, not completely, but they largely reversed their ruling from just 2 years earlier. What had changed? There were no more black people who were putting pressure on the system. And so that 2% of the population who had historically ganged up on black people to purge them and drive them out of their tribes, now they were going to have to fight these fights on their own. And we see how it's going. Now, these Native American groups have gone out of their way to show how racist they are against black people for no reason whatsoever. It's not as if black people did anything against them, and yet they hold as much contempt as any of these white supremacists. And while it's true that there's a bunch of $5 Indians, that is white people falsely claiming to be Native Americans because their ancestors paid $5 to get put on the Dawes rolls, the truth is a lot of those red Indians are just as bad, if not worse. Read up on how they collaborated in the slave trade and worked as slave catchers. A lot of Native American groups allied themselves with the Confederacy during the Civil War. So these same people are now saying that if black people in California get something, well, they demand that they get something too. And to do it on the grounds that there's some sort of commonality between them and black people on this issue, there is not. While not all Native Americans have been overtly racist, way too many have. And these anti-black racists in the Native American community are the first to say, well, black people were mistreated, but... They always throw in that but, which means to disregard whatever came before it. A lot of trolls and lurkers pretend not to know why we tell everyone that we're only speaking up for ourselves now, and everybody else is going to have to hold their own. Well, this is the reason why. We've got a broken back from 150 years of carrying the load to make sure that everybody else is treated humanely while we get slapped in the face by those exact same entities. So is anyone going to tell these Native Americans that none of them suffered the Trail of Tears? Or that none of them was displaced, so they're not entitled to anything? That nobody in living memory can claim to have been run off their Native American land? Of course not. They haven't done it in 140 years. They're not about to start those talking points now. They only reserve that cop-out for when they're talking to us. When Native Americans were getting their reparations and getting their land and everything else, did anyone see black people trying to hijack the white media coverage and say, well, if you're going to be giving anything to Native Americans, what about us? We don't do that to anyone else. So why are they trying that with us? Everyone does the same thing. They have absolutely nothing to do with us until there's something they want. or until white power is slapping them around. Then they try to link themselves to us, and the instant they think they've got what they wanted, they turn right around and show us their behinds. That's what happened when the Native Americans got that ruling from the Supreme Court 2 years ago. They figured, well, why should we say thank you to black people? In fact, why should we show any solidarity with them at all? We got what we wanted, and that's just the way it goes. Well, this is just another example of why we have no friends. And if anyone else thinks that they're going to dilute or derail our reparations claim, or that they're going to opportunistically capitalize on it by having other people say, well, we are all people of color and we are all victims of white supremacy, well, all I have to say to that talking point is, what's this we stuff, white man? Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Cloudwalker Z, Fan Durand, Cancel Account, Dia Williams, and Aisha Sarpong. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.